eloquent and complete introduction. I can just show pictures now, right? Yeah. I'm very pleased to be here in Istanbul. This is really, I think, only the third time I have been here. The second time I was just at the airport because I got caught in the volcano, but I really haven't spent enough time here at all. When I have been here, I'm always amazed at how beautiful the city really is. I mean, the topography and the scale and the water is really compelling. I need to come back and see it for real. The other remarkable thing about Istanbul is, and I don't understand why this is, but everybody's so beautiful. Really, I don't know. Well done, everyone. Very well done. But it's, I don't know how you have managed that, but really, you're a great looking group of people. I think what I will do is I will give a little kind of introduction to, I guess, what I'm really kind of concerned about, which is, of course, our environment. Because I do have children. I have 3 kids. I am worried for our future. I've been around a lot. I mean, I've done so many things because I'm old at this point. But it's really a very, very important issue. But then, after I am done with a kind of this kind of little lecture, then we can actually just look at pictures, because I think the proof is in the pudding. It's kind of, we'll have more fun anyway looking at pictures. Should I go forward here? Okay. Yeah, let me get my granny glasses on. Here we go. I was always wondering why landscape architects were so lame in trying to express what our role in sustainability, this topic of sustainability, was. Because, as we know, most of it is dominated by architecture. And why is it dominated by architecture and architects and green roofs and green walls and technology? It's because between 50 and 80% of our resources are spent in building buildings and living in buildings. So there's a very strong mandate to get our act together in terms of building buildings that operate better than they do. The other thing, of course, is that all the technologies involved in building buildings are supported by a huge industry. So the industries are also interested in the topic, which tends to leave the landscape, which is the green part of the topic, out of the discussion. So we as a profession we've been not very strong in expressing what our role can be. And after thinking about this, I came to a conclusion that, well, number one, we are not really technologically based as a profession, and never will be. So if companies and industries are not really vested in what we do, it makes it, of course, more difficult to understand and explain. That was one issue. And then, of course, on a site-by-site basis, where somebody figures out where the building is and you're dealt with designing the leftover pieces, there's very little to talk about. But when you think about cities and how to build cities, and what the issues that we have today in terms of climate change and urbanization, when you start thinking about that, then all of a sudden the landscape, and I'm not just talking about green. When I'm saying landscape, I'm talking about everything in between the buildings. Most of our landscapes are roads. They're paved over. In cities, it's like landscaping a supertanker. It's not about just green. It's how to actually get people from place to place, how to incorporate public transportation, how to make your open spaces safe, how to make them places that people and cultures can integrate, and how to incorporate natural environmental systems as well. On top of it, how do you actually make it attractive to people? Because that's what sustainability is about. Nature doesn't care about us. I know this is bad news, but nature doesn't care. We have to care about us. Nature will roll on without us. So sustainability is how we as human beings kind of recalibrate us, ourselves, so that we can actually survive. Anyway, I'll keep on going here because I think that the awareness of our urban landscape as a built piece of infrastructure is crucial now to designers, city leaders, developers, and that the landscape itself, the urban landscape, is crucial to a city's performance and livability. But this is a very new paradigm and is very little appreciated by, well, I'd say almost everyone. New megacities, a vast global trend towards urbanization, and a world population of 7 billion plus, and a surge of cities that are now growing and regenerating casts the topic of the urban landscape in a whole new light. One of the many functions of the urban landscape is economic. And when I coined the term softer side of sustainability, I'm talking about the non-technologically but human-driven systems that a landscape must incorporate into its planning and design. The urban landscape can help to underwrite a city's economy by making sure that places of business are easily accessible and well connected by public transportation, that you can bicycle. For example, Copenhagen is a city where they incorporated bike lanes, and that Jan Gehl, who is somebody who everybody should know about and read his books, convinced the city to incorporate the bike lanes because it turns out that people are much healthier riding bicycles, and it cut down the cost to the city of operating hospitals because there was a lot less bad health. This has all been proven and is there. The data is there. But the other thing is that mayors of major cities now acknowledge the role of the public landscape to attract new populations to their cities or keep them so that they can grow their economies and thrive. Sophisticated mayors now consider well-educated people like yourselves as a natural resource. You guys and your brains are as valuable as oil and water. So the mayors are anxious to be able to compete globally by attracting you to their cities or keeping you in the city to actually generate economies. The beautification of a city and the accessibility to green spaces and tree-lined streets, and don't forget the streets, because it turns out that statistically people spend something like 8 times more of their time on the streets than in parks. So the street environment is more important to the quality of life in cities than parks. I hate to say this, but it's true. Anyway, the beautification and the greening of a city is used to entice knowledge-based workers. Thus, the public realm landscape is one of the primary tools for doing that. They also realize that in a global marketplace, which you're in, Istanbul is a global player, that your city has to actually be a city of choice. And choice is now an operative concept within sustainability, as that it is a given that people will choose something attractive over than something that is not attractive. And if you think making something isn't attractive is not important, then you don't know human beings. I mean, whole industries consider their design capacity to connect to people as major intellectual property and is highly guarded. So attractiveness and beauty actually is very, very important in terms of getting people to buy in or to want what you're selling, which may be your city. The public realm landscape also underwrites environmental and human health by providing access, as I said, to public transportation. We all know now, or I hope we all know and understand what the environmental benefits are to actually incorporating a functioning landscape into anywhere. I mean, we understand in a city that landscapes are only operative as systems, not little pieces. Little pieces are okay, but pieces of land that connect and form systems so that water can flow, that water can percolate into the ground and go back to the aquifer, that water can be cleaned through running through soil, that it's retained and detained, that you use recycled water. Water will be the next oil. You use the landscape to manage your water. If you want to see a city that's been super successful at this, look at Singapore, which has the most advanced water management system in the world, and it's also just downright beautiful. The other thing is that we know that trees collect particulates and clean the air. We know it reduces heat loading so that you don't have to use as much energy to regulate your buildings. We also know that a connected landscape creates habitat for animals and plants, and that these systems actually support not only healthy life for flora and fauna, but for humans as well, because we need to be connected to each other. Very importantly, and for new and evolving cities, the public realm landscape provides the arena for social interaction and integration of immigrant communities and create a leveling of a level playing field for people of different socioeconomic backgrounds. The ability for new cultures to evolve from older ones as a result of shifting demographics and world economies are done in the cities which are typically their first port of call. So cities are very, very important in cultivating and creating new cultures. It's here in the city's parks, sports fields, and plazas, and streets where people from different backgrounds meet and eventually forge new cultures, a necessity for growth and social evolution. Social integration is an earmark of cities that remain relevant, attractive, open, politically stable, and economically and culturally active. In cities, people of different backgrounds and cultures influence one another as they incorporate progressive lifestyles into the fabric of their diverse daily lives. The public realm landscape is essentially the pot in which the melting happens, because the creation and integration of a culture does not happen in your living rooms. It happens out on the streets and spaces of the city. That's where it happens. Also, the ability for the public realm landscape of a city to provide the forum for cultural life is now of utmost importance, as the cultural and environmental health of cities is at the top of the mayor's to-do list. The cultural offer of a city is a huge attractor, and now, in of itself, is a new industry. Activities that were once found only inside museums and theaters are now on the streets and open spaces of cities, where one can enjoy street performance, concerts, art installations, and dance. The public realm landscape is the new stage for cultural events. This openness and generosity reflects a lively and open city where people from all parts of the globe can participate, integrate, and enjoy themselves. But how does design actually fit into all this? I'm a designer. My background is in fine arts. I really care about design. And this is another place where we as designers have not been particularly good at articulating our own value. And I still have this same argument at the School of Design. It's like, well, why can't we make a better case for design itself? Is it really completely irrelevant? I think not, and I'll tell you why. I think it's a false belief that one can achieve sustainability based only on smart technologies and functioning ecosystems. The reason is that people are part of the environmental equation. Nothing can sustain itself over time if we are not invested in it, either intellectually or, probably more importantly, emotionally. All the smart technologies, appropriate materials, and energy used to build a project or a community will be wasted simply because it does not meet the spiritual, psychological, and emotional needs of people. It simply will not have any appeal and therefore will have a very limited shelf life. Good and great design can help to achieve sustainability. In conclusion, it's clear that with the global trend towards urbanization and the realization that we have limited global resources, the most important role we have professionally, and perhaps all the design fields, is to encourage densification through planning and designing livable and healthy cities. A city's public realm landscape plays a crucial role in helping to combat global warming and shrinking natural resources. However, this can only be achieved if our urban landscapes are designed to be more than just merely functional, but as wonderful, inspired, attractive places to live and work for cultures and socioeconomic levels, so that everybody has access to these wonderful spaces. So, okay, that's my speech. Now, let's look at some pictures and maybe have some fun. Is there any way of turning off these lights? I know the videographers won't like that, but I'd rather that you saw the screens better. I mean, we're not that great looking, right? All right, okay. You are, but I'm not. Okay. I apologize. Our newest book, which is called Recycling Spaces, is not here tonight, but I'm going to hope that we can actually get this to you, but it's just out. And what we've done is we've taken the public work that we've done and tried to actually, we've interviewed people to find out whether these spaces, these places that we've designed, have actually had any greater impact. In other words, do people come to these places? Are businesses opening? Are there more festivals there? Are economies changing? You know, what have the effects been of our own work? So, you know, it's not a compendium of work, but it's about, 10 different projects where we've been able to track some of the changes that these spaces have actually made. So hopefully you'll get a chance to see this book. Gorkhan has really talked about our practice a little bit. First of all, this work is not done single-handedly by me. I've worked with an amazing group of people through the years. Our main office is in London, and the reason is that for what we do, it seems like almost every place is a little bit more susceptible to or open to the idea of sustainable cities than the United States, or open to design. We seem to be kind of a little bit off the map. I didn't know that until I started living in London. But from London, we get to work globally. We have people from all around in the office, around the world in the office. But I would say that our main focus is really the importance of the urban environment. We're city people. I will show you that I believe that, and have always believed that, landscape could be a cultural art form. Just like architecture or sculpture or dance, we make our landscapes, especially in cities. So if we make them, we can design them. And if we design them, it can carry content, it can communicate. It doesn't have to look like anything. So anybody who gets up and tells you that, the landscape has to tell you the story of water, or it has to express the process of landscape, or anything else that a landscape has to be, is lying to you, and they're using it as propaganda. The landscape, if you're thinking of it and designing it, it can be anything. So I still absolutely believe that. I believe that it's important to communicate emotionally to one another, because that's actually how we do communicate as humans and how we operate. We try to use our intellect to curb our stronger side, which is still psycho-emotional. But in fact, if you don't really communicate on an emotional basis, you haven't communicated. As landscape architects, we have a lot on our plate, as I said. When we go to a project, especially bigger projects, we're at a table with environmental engineers, planners, architects, wayfinding specialists, graphic designers, horticulturalists, soil scientists. These are all people who really are masters at a particular silo of information. Our job is to take that information and put it together into a way that people will respond to. And by the way, if you guys are rooted in technology, you should go and find a great engineering firm to work in, because technology is outdated in about 2 days. Designers actually are tasked to integrate the most recent information and turn it into something that is usable. Power of integrated thinking, the power of creative thinking. That's our highest calling as human beings, is to be creative. And it's our job to envision the future, to move the discourse forward, to take risks, and to bring your own imagination to the table. Because if you can't speak, if you think you're speaking for others, think again. The only person that you can speak authoritatively about is yourself. So that's what we need to hear. We still need to hear the voice of the individual. That will move us. Okay. Whoops. So again, just to say what I said before, designing creates human value. And value will make something that sustains itself. So design is an integrated part of sustainability. Okay, I'm going to step back for a bit now. We'll just start look at pictures. And my own background is in fine arts. All I ever wanted to be when I grew up was an artist. And I actually went into landscape architecture. Well, I never wanted to go into landscape architecture. It really bored me. About 30 years ago, it was a really boring profession. But I wanted to find out how to actually work in the landscape like these artists who I studied in the 60s. This is Robert Smithson. They were known as the earthworks artists. And these guys went out into the American Southwest and invented a new kind of art that engaged the landscape. Smithson is talking about process. He's questioning kind of what is art? Can art be a process, or does it have to be something you put on the wall? He just dumped a truck of hot asphalt down the side of the hill. So this really became a very powerful discourse within the profession, and certainly it moved me. Another Robert Smithson piece called The Spiral Jetty. I was so excited about these artists. This is Nancy Holt, her sun tunnels, which actually allowed the stars to come in at night. They were these heroic landscapes that basically responded to their environment out in the American Southwest. And even better yet, they were saying, well, fuck you, art world. These are not for sale. This is not a commodity. This is an idea, this is a place. And they became these there was like going to Mecca. They were like holy places. They still are in kind of the, in history of art, of course. Robert Smithson's, Christo's Running Fence, which is about political process as well as really expressing the landscape. Michael Heiser, very, very important. Richard Long. Minimalism, very important concept in landscape, because guess what? You're always going to be asked to do Mission Impossible. There's never enough money in the landscape, and it's so big. It costs a lot. So how do you deploy lowly materials to create the biggest effect? So the minimalists were very, very important. Daniel Van Buren, more and more artists have actually engaged this arena. This is on top of a garage, can't hold any weight, and with a very simple device, this is in the Palais Royal in Paris, has created a stage for interactivity. And I am a big fan of his work. So this is really kind of what I wanted to do. And the very first out-of-school project I decided to do was something I could build myself, which was the bagel garden. So I started doing these installations because they were fast, they were quick. The White Institute, I got a lot of, I would say I got a lot of attention because, well, I was saying, well, these are landscapes too. And at this time, this was very bad manners because landscape was about craft, which was a really old-fashioned idea. It was concept-based, which was also an alien idea to landscape. They were temporary. Oh, heavens. I mean, everything is temporary, and landscapes are just slow performance pieces. But I did them because it felt good to make something. I like to make things, and I still do. I'll show you the work that we are still, this was just recently, we did this in Reykjavik, but we're still doing art pieces. And I guess I've really been thinking about how do we really grow with the challenges. And of course, over time, I've strayed doing large projects as well. So I start off with little art installations. Right now, I'm going to show you some kind of bigger work that we've done. This was a competition for the Navy Pier in Chicago, and these are all kind of typical issues that we find ourselves in cities. But this is on Lake Michigan. It's about, I don't know, almost a mile. It's like 3,000 feet long. It's been over-commercialized. It's super ugly, although it makes a ton of money. But now they're finding that people aren't showing up there anymore, probably because it's so ugly and beat up. So they ran a competition to see how the Navy Pier might be regenerated. So kind of what we did is we took away the old kind of neoclassical circle, made a wetland garden, but we created a series of docks so that the historical footprint of this working dock was still respected. We had to redo the amusement park, and you'll see these are floating docks which have been engineered so that they were really environmentally very, very sensitive. This is a wetland garden that operates within a museum so people can actually explore and see what originally grew on the side of the river. And then this connects these floating docks. This is for performance, a playground that connects to the amusement park, a fishing area, these are the docks for boats, and this is kind of a city hot tub, and then a skating rink. And so, I mean, this is an idea, precedent of kind of using concrete, which turns out to be the most sustainable and ecological material to use. The amusement park, where we kind of connected by using this wooden ramp that would create the base for a playground. Ski areas and sledding in the winter. Again, working with environmental engineers to figure out how this would work. Ned Kahn, who is a wonderful artist, to create a kind of a shimmering aluminum surface. And then this is a city hot tub area that would be heated through the heat generated from operating the buildings in the winter. And then in the summer, an urban beach and a fishing pier. So in the wintertime, it becomes a big skating rink. Now, unfortunately, we came in second place to field operations, who basically ended up just doing the end of the pier. So we were considered the top of the heat. We were competing with, big and, other teams. But we came close, but unfortunately, we didn't win it. This is another big project, a waterfront project that we worked on in Abu Dhabi for the planning office for about 2.5 years, which was the planning and design of about 4.5 kilometers of their city beach. And there are all sorts of environmental issues I won't go into, but this really has a very high LEEDs rating. But the real issue was the fact that socially, nobody much likes each other. The Emiratis don't want to be looking at Westerners. The Westerners don't want the workers, and the Emiratis don't want the workers, who are usually men from Southeast Asia, looking at them. The men shouldn't be where the kids are, and the women. So how do you kind of take a culture where boundaries really needed to be set, and at the same time created a system where they could integrate? So what you're looking at is a strategy where we've taken off all the little buildings, put the bathrooms, restaurants, changing rooms, shops underneath these roof gardens that allow us to plant trees, so people could actually be on the beach under trees. And then this would separate the beach from this great big highway, and also future-proof the city, because the water is going to rise. Nobody wanted to hear us saying, well, guess what, in 50 years your city's going to be underwater. But, it will be. We also work with architects. We actually are asked to, work with architects on our teams, which are basically landscape-led plans. So we're starting to see that more and more landscape architects are convening large teams together, so that the planning, the integration of the environment, movement, mobility, all that stuff is integrated first, and then you decide exactly where the buildings and how they operate. So this is this great big kind of beach club. We worked with Jones Lang LaSalle in terms of determining the program, how you actually figure out how people use space. Down here is the beach below. Up here are the planted parks, and there is a major promenade for people along here, and also another kind of route. So that's the basic structure of it. And this kind of shows you the scale of this project. This is a community center. There were also water taxis, a community center. The nightlife is very important because it's so hot there, and of course it's a young population, so there was a big demand for playgrounds and making sure that it was a fun place to go to at night. So this kind of shows you this system of this kind of in and out, jig-jaggedy edge. And this was done in order to create rooms. These rooms are all about 100 meters, which meant that they could be cordoned off and divided up according to who needed to use what, but still gave us a great amount of flexibility for the future, much like an industrial building. It's why industrial buildings today have such longevity, is that they easily accommodate changes of use. And then, of course, how to actually create a landscape out of indigenous plants. Now, one problem is that we found out that in order to do that, they'd have to dig these plants out of the desert, which meant that their seed stock would be greatly diminished. So it turns out that the more sustainable strategy is not to use the indigenous plants, because that would condemn them from using to create nurseries, but to actually ship them in, but use the plants that we know would actually be able to deal with the climatic conditions. So sustainability is an ongoing discussion. It's not like, oh, now we know about it. You really have to balance things out. And this kind of really shows you the whole breadth. And again, there are going to be parks and connections back to the city. I'll go through this really, really quickly. This is a competition that we worked on about 4 years ago with Liebskin's office. We work with him. It's a brownfield site. It's this whole area here, which is across from downtown Seoul. And it's probably the biggest mixed-use project happening maybe in the world today. So after the master plan, which we did win, because we actually integrated the landscape and created a waterfront park, which Seoul doesn't have, the developer then went ahead and hired on kind of every mega superstar starchitect, known on the face of the earth. I mean, there's, if I can remember, Renzo Piano, and we worked with, let's see, this is Big and MVRDV, and Daniel Liebskin, SOM, Coop Himmelblau, KPF. I mean, it was just a cast of thousands. But we were asked to work with about 5 of the architects. This one is for Daniel Liebskin, and the point that I'm making is that every architect is different. I love architecture. About every other person in my family is an architect. My father, my husband, my son, my sisters, my cousins, my uncles. It's like a disease. But I knew I never wanted to be an architect. But I do love architecture. And I think that the ideal situation is where the landscape and the architecture have a conversation. Now, you might want to have a conversation that is a dialectic, or you might want to have a conversation that is oppositional, but at least you're in conversation. But the idea that you have the masculine vertical building set against the passive green landscape is so 1919. That's such an old idea. So we're always trying to do something. This is another Liebskin building, but this time the building is actually twisting. It's an office building. The other one was a housing project, so it was much hard, it had to operate in a very different way. But all of these buildings, number one, are on top of a podium. So most of our work is highly technical. There are weight issues, drainage issues, access issues. I mean, there are always, sunlight. But we always try to make something that is expressive of the building. This one is a great one. This is by MVRDV. This really caused a stir because everybody, the story was that, oh my God, this is like 9/11. And actually it's a fantastic building with this kind of cloud of units halfway up the building. And on the same site was this kind of heroic building by Big, we work with. And the task was for us to try to join both buildings together in a landscape that had to function for commercial use, hotel, as well as residential. So these are all mixed use. But we took the idea of the tradition of Korean quilt making, we kind of brought it directly to the site. And then we worked to create a planting palette, and then you could kind of see it goes from hard to soft. There's an adjacent park here, where we created a series of different kinds of spaces that would function, for all the different kinds of people who would be living there. And of course, the landscape is a spatial medium, so the idea of creating different spaces using different plants, color, surface, growth, texture, shadow, movement, time, these are all in our paint boxes. Again, this is a plaza in Toronto. It's a technical surface. It's on top of a subway stop, so it means that every tree has to have its own man-made pit, an environment held up by steel with a way of draining it and pumping water into it. These are like, I don't know. Again, this is like landscaping the top of a supertanker, but you still have to understand the supertanker, and you have to make that surface work. So I was just saying, it's very expensive building landscapes inside of cities. But on the other hand, if you do that, you also can make a lot of money. Your investment comes back to you. So this neighborhood actually invested in redoing what was a parking lot into this little pocket park. This actually is a real stone we dynamited out of a field, a farmer's field, and pieced it back together over a huge piece of styrofoam because, of course, it's heavy. But it's a shopping district, and this shopping district has now become so popular because people can shop, they can sit, they can rest, they can catch the wind, and then go back shopping. And it really has become very, very successful. This rain fountain, which is kind of designed after those kind of cheesy oil drip fountains. It drips water. In the wintertime becomes an ice wall. Minneapolis, again, same thing. In this case, the city did not want to spend any money to hold up any trees. People say, well, why don't you use trees? Well, Martha hates plants, or she's not contextual. Well, the contextual part is that this is on top of a garage. It can't hold up any weight. The city didn't want to actually put in any steel. The developer didn't want to dig down further so you could put your root ball into the surface. So all these big forces basically result in a plaza that cannot hold any trees and cost something like $100 a square foot. I mean, it was, no, $8 a square foot. You put more money into your bathrooms than what we as Americans will put into our public spaces. So I was pretty pissed off about it. It hurt my feelings that nobody really cared about the landscape. So I decided, well, I'm going to try to do something that is sculpturally interesting. And of course, people want green, they just don't want to pay for it. So the idea was to create a sense of green by making these great big mounds. And that way people could walk through the green and feel that they were more in a green space. But the requirement was that it was an open plaza. So because it's a civic plaza. And then again, these are actually highly engineered mounds that have about, let's say, a foot, this much soil, that is actually held in place by fabric and pins on top of styrofoam. Because nobody wanted a plaza that could actually hold trees, way before I came on board. But what we were able to do is to find these little pockets and plant these tiny little, almost bonsai-looking pine trees that are called jack pines. And they are the pioneer species. So this was kind of a tribute to the pioneers that came out and created Minneapolis. And then we hauled in these logs because the initial industry of Minneapolis was logging. Then lastly, because it gets so much snow, it can get, 3 feet of snow, we needed to make something that was sculpturally strong enough so that after it snowed, you could still see it. This is in Arizona and the city of Mesa. You can see that in our cities, there's lots of space. These are the original buildings. They're 1-story tall. So, and the streets are about 100 feet wide so that you can turn a team of oxen in a U-turn. So, welcome to the US of A. But the city wanted to try to attract inward migration. We have places that need to be filled, that actually need densification in the United States. So in many senses, we're kind of different. But the city leaders decided they were going to build a performing arts center. We worked with the architects to really come up with site plans. So the best thing is if we're involved in the site planning phase. So our idea was to keep a street wall at an edge and bring the public space inside so it was a walkway and create an address to the theaters. There's an art gallery and a school. And the idea was to create a public space that invited performance. So you can see this is like a stadium where people can sit. There are little stages, there are water tables, there are all these invitations to sit, to relax, to watch performances. It was really designed like a 3-ring circus. Now this is also in the Southwest, which doesn't have a lot of water, so the only places we used grass was actually where people sat. And everything else was made of local stone. And we used the local plants as sculpture. So we made a big deal about that the plants were actually on stage. So you'll see that at nighttime, these plants are lit up like a stage. We also created these water features. This is a water table based on the Villa Lante in Italy, where there's only about an inch of water. And the idea is that people can come by and just play with it. You don't need a lot of water to invite people to interact and have fun. So the idea is that also between the theater breaks, you can come out and lounge and drink your wine. The main event is a basically a big ditch. It's like a swale that is about 200 meters long, and it's been designed to mimic the water system of the area where it rains in the spring, there are flash floods, it floods and fills up the ditches, and then over time the ditch drains. And the idea, here it's full, the water is up, and here the water is gone. And it's on a computerized timer so that maybe it fills up maybe 3 times a day, but it can be programmed. So people come and wait for it to be filled up and drain. Then everything has been designed to cast beautiful shadows because of the quality of the sun. And then these are light wells that go into the gallery below, but we actually found out that this is attracting people to come down, open up businesses in Mesa, to live in Mesa. And the best fact of all is that it's now the #1 place in Arizona to take wedding pictures. I'm very proud of that. In the mid-90s, we were asked to take this site. This is your urban landscape. This is exactly the urban landscape. This is what we have to deal with as landscape architects. We were asked to redesign this space after there had been a very serious bomb blast in the 90s. And that's what this space was designed to, where we basically, created a public plaza and space that hadn't existed there. Now, I'm not going to go into the narrative about it because it's kind of long, but the idea that we go into every project and we try to research what the history was of the site. And it might be a geological history, it might be a phenomenological history, it might be a geological history, in which case this was. It's also, Manchester is the place where the Industrial Revolution started. But after understanding what happened on a specific site, it turns out that every site is different. What the ambitions of the client might be, who use it. So all these things start to kind of create a narrative that is not so important that you or the people who go there understand, but that guide us. This was actually an existing little stream that was under the road that we kind of brought up and re-expressed. And this has been one of the most successful spaces in all of the UK and really helped to create a whole new economy in the middle of Manchester. Same situation here in Dublin, where this whole area is a brownfield site. It's an old dockland area, and the city of Dublin decided they wanted to regenerate the whole area. Now, the UK tend to be very, very smart about how to attract developers to a site. And what they often do is that they will implement a piece of the public realm landscape, which means that developers are more able to imagine what could happen there. They've seen an investment already, and they're willing to actually pay more to buy into it after there's been an improvement. So that's exactly the situation here. These 2 sites were going to be built. This was going to be the site for Daniel Libeskind's Performing Arts Building. This is a hotel, and this is an office building. And they wanted us to build our landscape first. Again, on top of a garage. There's no way it can hold a tree. There are severe limitations to most of the work that our practice works on. We never get to actually dictate how much the developer is going to spend, what they need to do to really make a landscape, unless these are incorporated into the codes and regulations. So what we did is we designed the site once we saw the building, and we decided to just Libeskind the site. This is a public building and serves a wider function, so we decided that we were going to create a context for the building and took one of his angles and rolled out the red carpet. The green carpet are planters and seats, and because we couldn't plant a forest, we planted a forest of red poles. So this is there now. It really has become a landmark. Everybody knows where this site is. It's part of what the city uses to brand the city, to attract people to come. But probably more importantly, we found out that even though Ireland is having a very difficult time economically, this space and everything around it is doing very well. The hotel is fully booked. The restaurants are fully booked, the office spaces are fully booked. People still want to be on this space. And so that has helped out everybody very much around the square economically. Again, we try to do things, we try to invent new ways of people using space, and typically we like to design things that kids can get into, because if kids like it, people like grown-ups like it too. We do get involved in housing. Sometimes we've done a couple resorts. This one is an interesting project that we did in Boston, where they're converting old shopping centers into housing for elderly, because people want to have the convenience of being able to go down, shop, go get a pair of shoes, groceries, and so they're kind of redoing these shopping centers as health and well-being malls, but also, you know, creating new places to live. And of course, it's a roof garden. It's designed sustainably with all the kind of systems. This just recently won a design award in Boston, or the ASLA. But this kind of typology and responding to the aging of a population is a very, very big issue. You guys are still young. This is a project that we're doing in Seoul, again with Rogers Stirk Harbor. Mixed use, 2 huge office towers, shopping, hotel, and residence. We've worked with them, you know, on the whole site. But the interesting thing is this little piece in the middle. I mean, it's all kind of interesting, but we don't have time. This is a man trap, basically. It's been conceived of as a place where men can go, hang out. It's actually on top of this interior building, while their wives go and spend more money, because the Koreans are very, very thorough, and they found that if they could create a lounge for men, the women would spend a lot more money. But again, this is on a rooftop. Everything has to be very light. Everything has to be accessible. But we created a rolling landscape within a forest of bamboo with, of course, a stream. The system is a hardwood floor. We found a guy in Kansas who knows how to twist and bend about an inch thick oak floor. And that meant that we could actually create seating, tables, everything out of one material. And underneath are all the canisters that actually grow this bamboo. So, I mean, this is what we're planning on doing in terms of creating a curved surface that flip up to make chairs out of just one material. We do interiors. Every once in a while we were asked to do this interior installation for Barclays Bank headquarters building. Of course, we came in at the end after they had ordered all the plants, and then they discovered that these 5-story atrias, that the plants only grew up 1 story, because planting things inside, typically plants don't grow. And then they had all this volume, this space, and they had too much light coming into the atria. So we had to do a landscape that was super light, because the structure couldn't hold any weight, and also helped to shelter the space from heating up. So we took what they had already bought, and we organized them into different floors. This one is the Monstera garden, where the real plants, which can only get this high, are on the ground floor. These are kind of the public spaces within the work areas, and then they float up inside the space. And here we worked on these spaces with a stage set designer. And the stage set designers are great because they're used to creating stages, and of course the landscape is a big stage, and they're very good with understanding kind of weight issues, and they have access to all sorts of really cool materials. We have done resorts. This one is in Miami Beach. It's the Delano Hotel, which it's pretty old now, but it still is kind of one of the hippest places to be in Miami. This was with Philippe Stark and Ian Schrager. And it's an existing Art Deco building. Basically, the idea was to create a super grid, a super forest of palm trees, and then this kind of dark, low forest of orange trees. But the story is all about exhibition-ism. Basically, being in a place where you want to watch people and people want to be watched, doing things you shouldn't be watching them do. So, there's kind of a high sex quotient going on in the hotel. So it was kind of all about that. And this kind of leads from their restaurant terrace area, kind of down these steps and into this dark forest that has kind of back in here, there's this bed frame. There's a bed frame. There's an outdoor kind of shower, a chess game. A kind of a funky little kind of setting for tables. So it's quirky. It's a kind of strange place, but it's become it's still held its value over all this time. This is one of the first pools ever designed like a beach, where you could sit in, have your drink, be in the water, and watch, topless women. Okay, this is the last one, and we're actually going full circle back to art installations, which we still really love to do. And this one was done just last year in Xi'an. This is, interior city of China. And this is a place that actually has these incredible terracotta armies. Our first strategy was to build this out of something that the craftsmen know how to do, which we tend to do. We tend to be artistically brave, but when it comes to construction, we like to be conservative. So Xi'an is a place where they have these incredible houses that are dug into the loess fields, this compacted earth. They also make this beautiful gray, warm gray tile, which is very beautiful proportion, and these kind of very spare arches are very traditional of their kind of religious buildings. So we took that as a starting point. Now, we were given the topic, as the Chinese tend to do. The topic of this was the harmonious coexistence of nature and city. So I thought, well, we don't want to do that. That's stupid. But what we ended up doing was a piece called The Harmonious Coexistence of Nature and City. And this is it. We ended up doing it anyway. Everybody was given, there were 6 master gardeners. This is a gardening, horticultural exhibition. But in our own kind of, perverse way, we decided to make a tiny little piece of city. And this is about, about 30 meters by 30 meters, about 120 by 120 feet. And it's based on the model of a maze garden. Maze gardens are very traditional gardens that are used by many cultures, and it's kind of crossed with a fun house. So the idea was that, let me just go back, is that you enter in through the slot, and then you go through a series of openings through these big wide walls. So the bottom of this is all very urban, and the city has a green roof. So that's kind of the big idea. The walls, these are all elevations that we sent to the Chinese to build. Each wall has these walls, so these openings, these doors. The hallways, however, are not parallel, so they're all kind of wonky at different angles. And at the end of every hallway are 2 mirrors. So you have the sense when you enter into this thing that you're not quite sure where you're going, you're not quite sure where it ends. It's very disorienting, and that was the purpose. So here we are going into this, whatever this is. People were actually very hesitant. They weren't sure whether they should go in. That was one issue. When I first got there, they had lined up all the trash cans along this wall. So I thought, okay, people really see this as urban. They put all the trash up against the building, this wall. So I said, no, you have to take the trash cans away, although I probably should have let them stay there. So when you go in, all of a sudden, you see that there's the introduction of mirrors and a doubling up of the space. Watching people, it turns out that, people are mostly interested in themselves. All of a sudden, people are engaged in themselves. But then when you turn into it, there are these kind of endless hallways. And there's nobody to tell you what to do. The Chinese basically are used to being told where to go, what to do. So this is pretty perplexing for them. What was fun is people started playing games and chasing one another. This guy was, following me and taking pictures, so then I started going on the attack and taking pictures of him. Some of the walls came to spaces that were too tight to get through. Most of the doorways led you into dead ends, which were these mirrored rooms. So then you had to kind of walk back out and try another way to go. But in the meantime, we strung up 1,000 of these little brass bells. So there was also this tension about hearing these bells, which are a very traditional part of Chinese lives. They like to hang bells and have sound in their gardens. You get these kind of weird mirrored situations. Finally, if you really actually walk straight through these middle doorways, you come to the end, which is this mirrored willow grove. So you come from the endless city into the endless landscape. And then you get to leave, and you leave through the hallways. But it's only until you're leaving where you understand the mirrors are one-way mirrors, and actually you've been observed the whole time. So the real title of the piece is Big Brother, but of course I didn't say that in China. That would be bad. But in fact, we realized how crazy this was when we saw this woman adjusting her underpants, and she didn't know we were watching her. So we thought, well, this is interesting. But the real scene was in the hallways. It was just hilarious. People were laughing and just watching people who had no idea they were being filmed. This woman kicked her boyfriend out of the room so she could take a picture of herself. And see how much in love he is? He's very much in love. I love him very, very. So it's all about this kind of vicarious looking at other people. People at first were angry when they found that they were being looked at, but then they went ahead and looked at everybody else. So it was, it's kind of human foibles. Okay, I guess on the human foible point, I'm going to stop. So thank you all very much. Thank you.